And then at the end of the presentation, we also have a list of helpful resources related to electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging. So you'll be able to see those, and then we'll send out this presentation via email afterward. All right, so here's the agenda. We'll do some speaker introductions. There are 3 of us. Then we'll kick right into how to pick the right EV for you, some key considerations there. And we'll go over some different EV models so you can figure out which one is right for you. And then Peter Glenn will take over and talk about how EV Life can help you in the buying and leasing process. And they're really simplifying that process to make it easy with some great resources, including the climate loan. And then finally, at the end, we'll talk about upcoming webinars and some useful resources. So my name is William Truesdell. I do sales and marketing here at EV Match. I have expertise in electric vehicle charging, the EV industry trends, public policy, and advocacy. And I've worked here for going on 3 years now. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter Glenn to introduce himself.
Thanks, William. I'm Peter Glenn, and I'm the co-founder of EV Life. We launched our product in late 2019, and our mission is to really make it easy for you to find and finance an electric car that fits your life. And I previously earned my MBA in sustainable management at Presidio Graduate School, and I've worked at larger tech companies like Glassdoor, and also helped build startups like Phoenix International, a clean tech startup that built micro leasing products for solar for people living off grid in Africa. And today those partnerships power over 3 million people to live off grid. So super proud of that, and super excited to be working in clean energy again at EV Life.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Hochrein, and I'm the founder and CEO of EV Match. And it's great to be here today. And thank you again for joining us to learn more about electric mobility. So I started EV Match in 2016, really as an innovative solution to address the growing need for electric vehicle charging. I bring expertise in clean energy, energy efficiency, electric transportation, and climate policy. And I previously directed energy efficiency training programs at Rising Sun Center for Opportunity, which is now based in Oakland, California. I am passionate about climate change mitigation, and I see electric transportation as a critical component in our clean energy future. So with that, I'm going to actually kick off the webinar and get started with really an overview of electric vehicle technology. Thanks, William. So as many of you know here on the webinar, electric vehicles are really an opportunity to reduce our carbon pollution as well as local air pollution. So transportation is the single largest contributor to carbon pollution in the United States. Luckily, we have electric transportation, and every day there's more available options for drivers. So electric vehicles have 0 tailpipe emissions, and they have lower greenhouse gas emissions compared to their gasoline counterparts. Next slide. So even though electric vehicles have their many benefits, you may be feeling a little bit intimidated or uneasy if you're considering an electric vehicle for the first time. There's certainly a lot of jargon to consider, and there are considerations with charging. So we really want to break it down, explain the various components to consider, and show you that it actually can be easy, can save you money, and is better for the environment. So we're going to go over what type of EV may fit your lifestyle best, and the things that you might want to consider when picking out a vehicle. And then we'll also discuss cost, so the upfront and the operating costs of electric vehicles, as well as charging considerations. Next slide. So first, we're going to talk about the types of electric vehicles. So first up, we have plug-in hybrids. So there are 2 types of EVs, plug-in hybrids and full battery electric vehicles. So to begin, we'll talk about plug-in hybrids. So a plug-in hybrid, also called a PHEV, is very similar to a conventional hybrid, except that the electric battery can be plugged in to charge from an external source. So plug-in hybrids have an internal combustion engine, and they also have an electric motor and a battery. Now, the plug-in hybrid generally has a much larger battery than a traditional hybrid, and they can spend longer periods of time in the pure electric mode before switching into gasoline power. Electric plug-in hybrids actually have an electric range of 10 to 53 miles is pretty standard before the gasoline kicks in. So a plug-in hybrid won't give you the full savings, cost savings and emission savings of a battery electric vehicle. However, they are very versatile and flexible, and they can be useful in a variety of scenarios. So we found that people really like plug-in hybrids who don't have access to home charging, people who may not be ready to make the full switch to a battery electric vehicle, folks who really want a gas car for long road trips, and then also people who maybe only drive 10 to 15 miles a day, and all of those trips can be on electric with a small battery. So some examples here on this slide include the Prius Prime, the Toyota RAV4, the Mitsubishi Highlander, and the Honda Clarity plug-in hybrid. And these are just a couple examples of plug-in hybrids. Next slide. So now we'll jump into battery vehicles. So these are full electric vehicles with no gasoline. And so these are powered entirely. These vehicles are powered by a battery, and they are charged by an external power source. So there is no gasoline, no internal combustion engine. Now, BEVs are considered a zero emission vehicle, or a ZEV, as you may have heard, which means that they have zero tailpipe emissions. Now, BEVs can be really great in terms of reducing your carbon emissions, but we've also found that people really love the performance of these vehicles, the instant torque, and the cost savings, the overall ownership savings. So these are especially useful vehicles for people who really want to shift all their driving to electric. They have typically longer ranges than a plug-in hybrid, so 100 to 330 miles per charge. Folks who want to have easy access to, or who have easy access to charging, will typically choose a BEV over a plug-in hybrid. So that may mean having charging at home or having charging at work. And lastly, if you really want to save the most on fuel savings, this is the vehicle for you. So examples here include the Tesla Model 3, the Nissan Leaf, as well as the Chevy Bolt. Next slide. So this chart here shows the percentage of sales of each type of EV in 2014 and then in 2019. The light blue shows the short range battery electric vehicles, so those with a smaller battery. The gray shows the plug-in hybrids, and the dark blue shows longer range BEVs. And the long range BEVs are considered 200 miles plus per battery charge. So as you can see, the long range BEVs became far more popular in 2019, really significant growth. And a big reason for this is that we have an increased number of available long-range battery electric vehicles on the market. And so a big component here is that the Tesla Model 3 came out throughout this period, and the Chevy Bolt. So I think this is also indicative of the future as we have more full electric vehicles coming out. This is a more popular choice among drivers. And so people, as I mentioned before, are making the switch to full battery electric because they like the smooth drivetrain, the impressive performance of these vehicles, the cost savings, so fuel and maintenance savings, which I'll talk about on the next slide, and then the environmental benefits. Next slide. So this is going to break down the upfront and operating costs of an electric vehicle. Now, many of you have probably heard electric vehicles are more expensive. And it's true that electric vehicles are typically more expensive upfront compared to gasoline vehicles, but there are more affordable EVs coming out every day, and there are significant operating savings to be had when you own an electric vehicle. Additionally, there are many incentives available to help reduce that upfront cost. So right now there are the federal tax credit of $7,500. In California, we have a $2,500 state rebate. Colorado has impressive state rebates, and there are many utility incentives as well. And Peter Glenn will talk about a tool that they've developed to help show you all of these savings and actually get a lower priced leasing opportunity with an EV, leasing or purchase opportunity. So this chart here, to dig in a little deeper, the top shows the monthly fuel costs for the Hyundai Kona electric vehicle compared to a gasoline vehicle. And so you can see here that there's significant savings from the electricity compared to the gasoline on a monthly basis. And then underneath that, this breaks down the savings that include the upfront costs of the vehicle itself. So you can see here in green that the Kona is a little bit more expensive than a comparable gasoline vehicle. However, those upfront costs are more than made up for in the savings from the fuel and the maintenance. So you can see overall with a 5-year projection, we're expecting to save $5,000 from this Kona electric versus another gas vehicle of similar build. So just to highlight here, it's important to consider the true cost of ownership as opposed to just the upfront cost of the vehicle when thinking about your purchase or lease. Next slide. So the upfront cost of electric vehicles can have quite a range, obviously running from a smart car or a Nissan Leaf to a Tesla Model X. However, there is a trend overall in that electric vehicle battery costs have been decreasing over time. And a significant portion of the cost of an electric vehicle is related to the lithium-ion battery. So as the cost of batteries go down, so too will the EV costs. And so you can see here that 5 years ago, EV batteries accounted for about 50% of the cost of the vehicle. And now that's down to 25%, and that's continuing to drop. So really, this is a great time to buy an electric vehicle. Next slide. So charging is one of the biggest barriers a car buyer faces when they're considering an electric vehicle. And so we know that this is a key concern for many folks, especially if you don't have access to home charging. But it's a new way of fueling a vehicle. And so it's important to kind of think about it in a different way. So next slide. There are 3 types of charging levels. So you will hear this, level 1, 2, and 3 as you consider your purchase. Level 1 is any standard wall outlet. So this is a 110, 120 volt wall outlet. And this is the slowest form of charging. However, it's extremely convenient. If you have access to charging at home, you can plug in your garage or driveway. This is great. You can charge while you sleep and you never have to go to a public charger or a gas station. So you will receive about 3 to 5 miles of range per hour, which typically is sufficient for people's commute. Most people's commute in the US is 30 miles or less on a daily basis. So you will be able to achieve that with standard charging, level 1 charging. Now, level 2 uses a 240 volt outlet and provides 10 to 54 miles of range per hour. So this is significantly faster. And this is the type of charging equipment that EV Match provides. And then lastly, level 3 or DC fast charging provides about 70 to 300 miles of range per hour of charge. This is extremely high power charging, and it's very useful along corridors to help with road trips. Next slide. So as I mentioned, home charging is very convenient. Typically it's level 1 or 2. So folks are using either a standard outlet or installing charging equipment like this EV charging station you can see here. And this provides cord management, also some other features such as scheduling, if you have a Wi-Fi enabled charging station, and other access control features. Next slide. Now, workplace charging is another great option. This is typically level 1 or 2. We have seen that many employers are installing level 2 charging stations so that people can charge while they're working. A lot of utility programs have opportunities to subsidize workplace charging. And I will highlight that we hear a lot that employers will install charging as a response to employees asking for it. So if you're considering an EV, it's definitely worth mentioning it to your employer or at your workplace and looking into that option of installing workplace charging. Next slide. Now, public charging stations are typically located in retail locations, public parking lots, and also along highway corridors, such as these charging stations that you see here on the slide. Now, these are typically level 2 or level 3, and they typically require payment. So they'll often be provided by a network such as EVgo, Electrify America, or ChargePoint, and they can be found through the PlugShare app. So this is a way to aggregate all the public charging stations. And any private charger that's made available to the public is then available in the EV Match app, which I will talk about. Next slide. So with our service, EV Match, we have a unique way of providing convenient EV charging. So we have a peer-to-peer network where individuals, businesses, and any private site host can rent out private charging equipment. So this means that anyone who's looking for charging can easily find a private charging station and quickly reserve it through the EV Match app, which has payment processing, which then is used to pay the site host for the electricity used. So drivers can search our map and reserve any specific charger at a specific time and day that works for them. And that's something that's not available in the public charging network otherwise, to know exactly when and where you will be charging. So I will mention that this app is also especially useful for property managers to share within their complex. So tenants can reserve and pay for charging sessions within their building or their HOA and effectively share a handful of charging stations within their building. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to William, who's going to talk about which electric vehicle might be right for you.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks for that presentation. And a lot of that information that Heather just shared will be useful moving forward with this. So keep it in mind. So now I'm going to go over the 3 different EV categories that most drivers fall into and that most car companies have currently built EVs for. So the first one is the commuter EVs. Commuter EVs, are typically recognized most often by the Nissan Leaf on the far left of your screen, the Chevy Bolt, or the Tesla Model 3. All of these typically have a sedan or hatchback style body, so they're a good fit for a personal car or for a small family. And then usually buyers in this category, they want 2 things. They want decent range, meaning that the car can drive more than 150 miles on one charge. And they also want a lower price point. So the Nissan Leaf is certainly one of the most affordable. You can get a new one for just over $22,000 after the federal tax credit. Additionally, there are usually state tax credits depending on the state you live in, and then possibly utility credits as well. The Chevy Bolt and the Tesla Model 3 both also offer impressive range, around 240 miles with a full charge. But I do want to mention that GM and Tesla are not eligible for the federal tax credit anymore, so those savings aren't quite as great as for the Nissan Leaf. Most EV models come with various battery sizes. You can choose different battery sizes. So if you have a large enough battery that supports your commutes to work or around town, many drivers can simply charge at home, as Heather mentioned, overnight. That's the most convenient. But everyone doesn't have access to a place to charge at home. So they may rely on workplace charging or, public charging networks, as Heather mentioned, one of them being PlugShare that aggregates all those public charging networks, and then also EV Match, where folks can rent out their personal chargers to the general public. The next category is the family-friendly vehicle. So just like gas-powered SUVs and minivans, family-friendly EVs are usually larger. So this includes crossovers and SUVs like the Kia Niro on the left of your screen here, and the Tesla. Well, actually, this is the Hyundai Kona, but Tesla Model Y is also a recently released SUV option. They carry a slightly higher price tag than the commuter category, around $30,000 after available incentives. Personally, I drove the Hyundai Kona at a ride and drive event in Vermont, and it was really great to drive. I can understand why it would be good for families because it has large cargo space and room for a large family. As Heather mentioned earlier in the presentation, the Kona is actually cheaper than owning a gas-powered Kona over 5 years. So even though the upfront price tag might be higher, the operating cost over 5 years actually makes it cheaper for the electric version. So in terms of charging for the family-friendly EV, families typically rely on home charging to power their cars. This is usually pretty important because parents don't have the luxury to spend time waiting for a public charger or waiting for their car to charge at a public station because they have a lot to do with their family. So home charging is quite essential for this segment. And then the last category I'm going to talk about are luxury EVs. So you might notice that many of the early electric vehicle models that came out were actually luxury vehicles, like Audi e-tron there on the left, the BMW i3, which actually has a pretty low price point considering it's in the luxury class, and then the Jaguar I-Pace, among others. So the reason that there are quite a few models in the luxury category is because typically early EV adopters have been higher income earners. So that's where the car makers have focused their energy. But right now there's clearly a shift towards serving regular car buyers. And even Tesla, they've come out with the Model 3 and the Model Y, both of which are relatively affordable options. Still, Tesla kind of straddles the luxury and the other category line. So for all three of these categories, as we said, home charging is the most ideal option for fueling the car. It's the most convenient, it's the cheapest. But once again, I want to mention that that's just not the case for everyone. If you live in a multifamily property, if you rent, you might not have the ability to park and charge at home. So at EV Match, we developed an affordable charging product specifically actually for multifamily housing. So property owners can easily install charging, and then tenants can efficiently share those chargers with payment processing and booking features. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Peter Glenn, and he's going to show you all about EV Life and the climate loan. So I'm going to actually switch over so he can share his screen.
Awesome. Thank you, William. Let me share my screen. Thank you again to EV Match for having us here. We're so excited to be continuing to work with you guys because of the way you make EV charging affordable and accessible for all and make it easy. I think for us at EV Life, what we really want to reiterate here on this webinar is, this process of shopping for an electric car can feel really complex. And the way it's typically done without assistance can take a really long time. But what we're all here to do is really help make the process a lot easier. And what we're doing on our platform right now is really trying to take all these many steps that we're talking about today on the webinar and really boil them down into a really simple process that can help you find your electric car even easier and faster and find the right one for you. So what we're doing, what I'm going to go through today is to go over some of the 7 best steps that we've seen that EV car buyers really need to go through at a very simple level to be able to find the right car for their life. So I'm going to actually open up the EV Life website and kind of walk you through like what would be a typical process and highlight some of the steps as we're going through the app. So from evlife.co, you can go through a pretty basic car search today. We plan to be adding some additional filters for budget, which is really important for a lot of folks. But today I'm going to look at the SUVs because there, as William mentioned, there are some really exciting and affordable SUVs on the market. I'm going to choose the Hyundai Kona, which is a really exciting, affordable SUV after incentives, smaller, more of a crossover SUV. I'm choosing the Kona because it also has some fairly typical features, and you can maximize your EV incentives here as well. So from the vehicle display page, we try to give you an overall snapshot of what you can expect that your fastest charging time that you can recharge on DC fast charge in around 61 minutes can save about 10,300 on your overall incentives. And that if you took a 400-mile road trip, it might cost you about $40. And that you can also have access to the carpool lane in California if you are signing up from there. So the first step, and once you figure out cars that you're interested in, one thing that is really essential to vet out is how will you do home charging. So if you own your own home or you have control over the electrical in your own home, the first free option, as mentioned earlier, is to use level 1 charging, which is totally free. No one's going to sell you an electric car without a basic cable to plug it into a wall outlet, just like your smartphone. And so you can power up that way. And for people who don't put a lot of miles on their daily commute, this may actually be enough for you to fully charge up. You may not need to install any fancy equipment. For level 2, we have some resources. Again, this is all specific to the car that you're looking at. How to basically set up a level 2 charger in your home, how much range you can get per hour, how long you can fully recharge the battery. So basically 9 hours, like an overnight charge, can get you from 0 to full while you're sleeping. And then we offer some recommended home chargers, some of those popular options that fit your car, and also some recommendations of installers who can help you navigate that sometimes complex process of installing a charger. In terms of public charging, William talked about the challenge of being in an apartment. I actually live in an apartment myself, and needing to access public charging to be able to power up. Public charging or workplace charging can be a great option for a home base. And we have we'll be adding some charging maps here in the coming week, but right now we have links to a number of different charging apps that can help you locate those. What I love about EV Match is that you're able to see a lot of private chargers that don't make it on the public maps, and give you even more access to charging options that you may not know about just by using apps like PlugShare and Google. The next step, the third step, is to really understand your range. If you are going to use this car for a road trip or for a commute, how far can you go on the battery? And so for the Kona, I'm going to map out my next trip, hopefully, from San Francisco to my hometown of Portland, Oregon, and see how far the Kona can take me. So basically pulling up the DC fast charge options, which are most likely the ones I'd use on a road trip because they're going to minimize the amount of stopping time that I have. In the Kona, based on a Kona's charging speed and the chargers that are available, I would need to make 2 different stops and spend about 2 hours total charging on my trip up to Portland, Oregon from San Francisco. It would probably cost around $44, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But we're trying to give you recommendations on how to consider those options. And I saw somebody comment that PlugShare is the best app for the EV owner. I think that PlugShare is great for planning trips like this as well. It's definitely an option to consider. We just want to make that available here without having to sign up for a PlugShare account. So you can get that information even easier, and it can be based on the car you're looking at. In terms of the fourth step, maximizing your savings, as Heather mentioned earlier, there's a number of different savings and incentives that are available for EVs. And so on a vehicle basis, we allow you to enter your household income, household size, and they get a really quick determination of what you're pre-qualified for in terms of incentives. Here in San Francisco, I qualify for a utility rebate, a California rebate, and a federal tax credit. Because I'm using the Hyundai, I qualify for the full federal tax credit. One caveat to note here is that for Tesla and GM right now, they've exhausted their federal tax credits. If there are some changes in government, in the federal government in the coming season, there may be a renewal of those tax credits. But right now, Tesla and GM, unfortunately, don't come with the federal tax credits. And I think that's a really important caveat to note. So from there, I think one really important thing, once you've narrowed down your choices and you have a sense of what charging and range looks like and your incentives, then it's really important to consider taking some test drives. Like get it down to 2 or 3 cars and go out and test out some cars. I'm going to pull up the slides again. So there are a number of different ways you could test drive. Some dealers, because of COVID-19, are still offering home delivery for test drives. Others are offering opportunities to come in and safely test drive with all sorts of, safety installed and people wearing masks at the dealership. So check with your local dealership to see what options are available for you. It's going to be hard to say because of COVID-19 what kind of ride-in drives will be available in the coming months, but Drive Electric Week is typically coming up. It's a national event in the fall. You can go to driveelectricweek.org and learn more about opportunities to find out more about ride-in drives. And then you could also consider renting a car. Turo is a website that it's kind of like an Airbnb for car rentals, and it allows you to rent from a pretty wide variety of electric cars depending on what area you live in. And this could be a great opportunity for you to try a car for a week and actually see what it feels like to drive electric, see what it feels like to find public charging or, charge up at home. That might be one of the best ways that you can really get a feel for it if you or your partner are uncomfortable at all with like shifting to a full battery electric, for example. One other big consideration that buyers make with electric cars is leasing versus buying. In the past, leasing has been a really obvious choice because the battery range, was less than 100 miles in many cases, wasn't very far, and there was this question of like, what's the technology going to look like in the next years? So the best data that I've been able to find on this is that in 2016, Bloomberg said that nearly 80% of EV purchases were leases, but across the board in other cars, gas cars, only about 30% of cars are leased. And so this kind of flips or inverts the relationship between leasing and buying for electric vehicles. It can be attractive to lease if you can get a really good deal, but it's also worth noting that shorter leases can reduce the incentives that are available. For example, in California, there's a $2,000 California rebate. It requires that you hold the lease for 30 months in order to qualify for that $2,000. So definitely be on the lookout for exceptions like that when you are considering leasing. I'm pretty bullish on buying and financing. I think that as we're seeing, the technology has improved a lot since 2016. The range is, in many cases for new cars, mostly over 200 miles per battery on battery electrics. And so I think most EVs you buy today could give you a typical like 5 to 10 years and still feel like they're really up to date with the technology. We're also seeing that decreased EV depreciation could make buying more attractive. So I'm a pretty 50-50 split on leasing versus buying now. It's not as attractive to lease an EV as it once was. And also COVID-19 deals from the manufacturers are becoming more attractive during COVID. 0%, no payments, 90 days, or even 180 days. I think it's really about looking for the right car for you and really talking with dealers, exploring other opportunities and figuring out where the numbers add up in your favor. So in terms of negotiating your best price, there are some great lease calculators out there. I think the best one that exists is leasehacker.com. Which I highly recommend. EV Life also has some internal spreadsheets that we use to help customers work through leases. And then you can also try to concierge your best price. So there are, in almost every city in America, someone called a car broker or a business of a car brokerage. You can find them on Yelp and find where the good ones are and hire somebody, pay them typically $500 to $1,000 to do all the legwork with a dealer and make it really easy for you. And EV Life has a small concierge service as well that we also help electric car buyers with specifically. Step 7 is around focusing on safe pickup or delivery. So some dealers still do ask for offer home delivery, and I certainly recommend asking for it if that's what would make you feel most comfortable with the test drive and with the actual purchase. But again, dealerships are also making their experience much cleaner, much safer at the dealership too. So just be sure to call ahead and ask what options are available for you. And then finally, just wanted to put this out there that our real new innovation outside of making electric cars easier is to make them cheaper to actually finance. And so we are developing a way, piloting this with some banks, to be able to offer basically pre-qualify you for your $10,000 or more in incentives, depending on the car, and to be able to use those EV incentives as a down payment on your loan. So if you're interested in learning more and reducing your monthly payment on financing by about $200, go ahead and sign up at evlife.co, and we'll reach out. Be sure to use the promo code EVMATCH. So we have a long wait list, and we'll be sure to move you to the top of the wait list and get you going on possible loan explorations through your EV Match promo code. And now I'm going to hand it over to William.
Thanks, Peter. That was awesome. So if you have any questions about Peter's presentation or about how EV Life works or the climate loan, please ask, and we can address those in the Q&A. So I did want to just list this page of resources that can be really great, especially if you're new to the EV world. So again, I said we would email this out. All of these links you'll have access to. On the left side for rebates and incentives, Plug-in America has a website called Plugstar that lists all of the different credits and incentives and rebates available across the US based on zip code. So you can easily search by zip code and find what's most useful for you. The federal EV tax credit, as Peter mentioned, is still operating except for GM and Tesla. So you want to take advantage of that. There is also a federal EV charging tax credit. So if you are planning to install a charger at home, you can earn a tax credit of 30% up to $1,000. That's good through 2020. So if you've already installed charging, it is retroactive. So definitely take a look at that. If you're planning on doing a large charging project, like some DC fast charging or level 2 charging in a public place, the tax credit's 30% up to $30,000. So you want to take a look at that if you're planning any charging projects. And then obviously EV Life has a great platform for you to see exactly what incentives are available to you, and you can even customize it by vehicle that you're interested in. So take a look at that. And then on the right side here, we have different websites and apps that are great resources for EV drivers or prospective EV buyers. So driveelectricweek.org, Peter mentioned it's unclear if we'll have any in-person events this year. I'm thinking probably not, but they are organizing a number of online events. So that's great. You can actually talk to EV owners, get their take, learn about their experiences and all that. Once the in-person events are back in swing, then you can actually test drive a bunch of cars. So that's great too. NLX, they make charging stations, smart level 2 charging stations specifically. So they are a great resource if you're in the market for a home charger or a charger for your multifamily property or workplace. PlugShare, I know that some people were talking about it in the chat, is a great resource. It aggregates all of the public charging networks. So you can easily find charging for your road trip, or you can look around and see what chargers are available in your area. My Green Car actually is a cool app that can help you understand what it's like to transition from your current gas vehicle and how much you could save if you switch to an electric car. So you can check that out. You can download that app. It's free, and it's pretty interesting. And then EV Match, last but not least, download our app. It's completely free. You can list your home charger if you want to rent it out, help more people find charging. And you can also work with us to install charging at your multifamily property or other small or medium-sized commercial location. And then we can help you monetize those. And then if you're an EV driver and you need to find more charging, we have unique chargers on our map that even PlugShare doesn't have. So it can be another resource if you're looking for charging wherever you are. All right, next slide. Great. Okay, so now we're going to get into the Q&A session. I wanted to do this little screenshot so that you know exactly where the Ask a Question box is. So if you have any, please enter them there, and we'll get everyone back up, all the guest speakers, and so we can answer these questions. All right. And if you want to go to the next slide, Peter, and just leave it on our contact info and our website, so anyone can contact us if needed. So I'm going to MC this Q&A session. The first question is, will the focus of this webinar be on new EVs? I'm interested in hearing about the used EV market. So Heather, you kind of touched on the different EVs, the plug-in hybrids and the BEVs. Do you want to talk a little bit about the used EV market?
Sure. Yeah, I can add a few thoughts there. So in general, I would say that it's exciting to see the used EV market, or the pre-owned EV market is developing. Some states have a more developed pre-owned market than others. California obviously has a pretty strong market. Recently, I was looking just to see what was available, and I found that you can definitely find pre-owned EVs for in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, with just about 30,000 miles on the vehicle. So that's really a pretty affordable vehicle considering the low mileage and the overall performance of the vehicle. I would say the Nissan Leaf and the Chevy Bolt are probably the most available vehicles that I've found in California. And a lot of those vehicles have about 30,000 miles on them. As they've come up after a 3-year lease, they then become available for sale. So I don't know if Peter, you want to add anything else there?
Yeah, I was just analyzing some Bolt pricing, like 2017 Bolt pricing, and was surprised to see that the price is so high, actually climbing into the high teens and even the 20s. So it is interesting to see that there definitely are some deals that you could find, but it seems like the used EV market is really hot right now. People are really snatching them up when they do get off those leases, and perhaps driving the price up. So yeah, it'll be fun to watch as more EVs get on the road, what the maturity of the used EV market will be.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing to know is that it's hard to find a used Tesla. I've seen that. Like a lot of those vehicles just get snatched up very quickly. Yeah. So that will change over time, but these markets are developing, and they are regionally specific.
What other thing to mention on used EVs is if you're in a zero emission state like California or Colorado, there are often special programs for lower income folks. In California, low income is like $58,000, $57,000 a year for a family, and you could qualify for up to in many cases $9,000 or $10,000 for turning in an old car, old in California determined by 2004. And be able to get a pretty significant amount of money in a grant form towards a used or new EV. So those opportunities do get surfaced on EV Life and other platforms like Plugstar when you do search your incentives and you enter your income. So look out for those as well.
Great. Yeah, and I was just going to mention that a lot of the car companies are really planning large releases of new models starting this year and then kind of through 2025, expected to release a lot of new models. So as more and more affordable options hit the market, I think that the used market's really going to take off. So that'll be exciting. I did also recently hear, at least in Colorado, that for the most part, anyone in the used EV car market is looking for something under $8,000. So that's kind of their price barrier. So I think, watching the EV used market reach that threshold will be interesting, and there should be a large uptick in purchases. Okay, great. So the second question here is, does the future belong to a 400 volt or 800 volt battery system? So Heather, you want to take that?
Sure. So I'd say, I don't have the answer to this. I think there's a lot to be determined in terms of what sort of specifications the automakers align on. But today, most EVs use the 400-volt battery system. And there is some discussion, particularly from Porsche and Kia, are exploring the 800-volt architecture for even faster charging. So this is for the charging system, how quickly those batteries can be charged. So there's been some discussion, but that's certainly not possible right now. I don't have the answer to that, but I think that there is some advocacy from EV drivers to have even faster charging. But then there's also discussions from electric utilities of sort of what impacts that will have on the grid and what kind of costs that will have to ratepayers to upgrade all this grid infrastructure. So there's sort of pros and cons on each side.
Great, thank you. Next question is, are there any thoughts on the Mazda CX-30 that was announced? Have you heard much about this, Peter?
I haven't. No, I'm sorry to say I haven't been following the CX-30 yet. Heather?
I hadn't heard of it. I just quickly searched and I see that it's available in Europe. It's not yet available in the US, and that it will be coming out, I believe, this fall in Europe. I will say it's exciting because Mazda doesn't currently have an electric vehicle on the market. So I'm glad to see that they're getting into the EV game. But other than that, I don't have a lot of details.
Great. Yeah. Well, and it's good to see, it seems like every week a new model is kind of hitting the airwaves. The new Nissan, SUV, is it the Aria? Is that how they say it? Mm-hmm. And obviously the Tesla Model Y, I've seen them driving around town, so that's relatively new for me. So it's exciting to see all the new models hitting the roads, especially if you're in a ZEV state. All right, so someone asked, what do you think about ABRP, the Abbott Route Planner? Are you familiar with this, Heather or Peter?
No, I have not heard of it. So something to check out, potential resource, I imagine.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, it's always great when we learn something during our own webinar.
So a better routeplanner.com.
All right, we just had a new question come in. Are there any all-wheel drive recommendations for electric vehicles? I assume is what they're asking. Do you have any insight into that, Peter?
Yeah, I would look at Tesla for their models. They do have some all-wheel drive options. I think that they have probably the widest range of options, from SUV to sedan. I think that Subaru claims in the plug-in hybrid space claims to have the #1 all-wheel drive plug-in hybrid electric vehicle in America right now. So it's a pretty exciting, car. If you're a Subaru lover, it's essentially going to give you a good chunk of range, as Heather was mentioning. If you're driving less than 30 miles on your commute, you're going to be mostly on electric in a plug-in hybrid like that, and you're also going to get the mountaineering ability to be able to go into the great outdoors and climb those hills and have those adventures without worrying about having to power up. So I know that in the market, SUVs, trucks, all-wheel drive vehicles are really critical for a lot of folks. They're extremely popular in America. And so I think, new projects like the Cybertruck and Ford getting involved with their trucks is really exciting to see, because that's where demand is in America. And it's exciting to see more and more options on the road. Unfortunately for all-wheel drive, it's a little bit more limited in 2020, but hopefully that will shift with the introduction of all sorts of new vehicles in 2021 as well. Yeah,
and you can check out our Instagram, EV Match's Instagram, because Heather, took her Chevy Bolt off-roading, and it seems to be pretty well. So the heavier weight of the EVs also can provide, in some cases, great traction, even if it's a two-wheel drive.
Yeah, I was going to actually mention that I ended up driving my Bolt on some dirt roads that were a little hairy the other day, and wishing I had all-wheel drive, but also being incredibly impressed with the performance of the vehicle. I was just wishing I had higher clearance. So that was my main issue. But I kept thinking to myself, wow, once there's an electric truck, like people are never going back. This is just, amazing.
Yeah. So, if you haven't heard about the electric trucks that are forthcoming, obviously the Rivian truck and SUV are extremely popular and getting a lot of airtime. So if you haven't looked at that, check it out. The Cybertruck as well, and the Ford F-150 electric that they've dedicated time to producing. And I'll mention too that because I'm from the mountains in Colorado, and I've talked to a number of EV drivers up there, many of them Tesla drivers, and they say that the Tesla performs extremely well during the Colorado winters in the high country. So if you're in the market for something that gets great traction in those conditions, it does appear that Teslas work well for that. I understand if Teslas are out of your price range, so hopefully more and more options that are affordable hit the market soon. I've always been a Subaru fan, so I'm hoping that they'll come out with an all-electric vehicle, but nothing yet. Well, great. So that was it for the questions that came in. So I think we'll wrap it up. I don't know, Peter or Heather, do you have any last things you wanted to mention?
Yeah, just to say thank you for all of you for coming to this webinar, and feel free to follow up with myself or any of us if you have questions or ideas or ways to improve our platforms. We're really excited. We're all customer focused, extremely customer focused, and we want to hear from you. So please reach out.
Yeah, I would echo that. I want to say thanks to everyone who joined today. And we would love to hear from you as well. If you have questions about buying an electric car, we want to help you find the resources that you need. And obviously on the EV Match side, we're really focused on charging and ensuring that you have charging where you need it. So please reach out either via email. You could chat with us on our app. We can do instant chat. We're on different social media platforms. So whatever way you'd like to engage, we're certainly here and hope to hear from you.
Great. Yeah, this was exciting, and hopefully we answer some of your questions. Again, I'm going to email out this presentation so you can have access to the links that we included, as well as our email addresses and websites. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'll also include a list of upcoming webinars in that email. So stay tuned for those. Register, tell your friends, spread the news about electric cars, because we need more and more people to drive them. So thanks again for joining today, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.